Hello, I'm Gemma and this is Non-Fic Books, and I want to do a bit of a video about the BBC History Magazine's History Weekend, which was held at York the last weekend that's just been. And this is a wonderful weekend full of history lectures held at the Merchant Adventurers Hall, which is a beautiful medieval building that used to be a guildhall and hospital, which is absolutely stunning location. And everyone gave about an hour's history talk, and it was all famous historians, people like Michael Wood, Jemima Ramirez, Dan Snow, Susanna Liscombe. Really good selection of people and a really wide range of topics. There's everything from Egyptology to like the detailed battle plan of Agincourt. So it's a really nice mix, and for most people who was interested in history, they would have been able to find something. And I went with an old friend, a school friend, who went also to York for university, but she did history rather than I did archaeology, and she now works for the National Trust, but occasionally we do try and meet up and do something a little bit geeky, like go to some of these talks. And we went to two talks, one on the Saturday afternoon, which was the broadcaster and historian Helen Castor, who you'll probably, if you've watched this channel before, know that I absolutely love. She's one of my all-time favourite non-fiction writers. I really love her writing style, so that was fascinating. And then on the Sunday morning, I went to see Marc Morris, who again has done a TV programme before, Castles. I think it was in 2012 or so, which has recently been re-shown. And this talk was on King John and the run-up to the Magna Carta. And overall, it was just a fantastic way to spend a bit of time. Going to two talks like that, it just really allows you to get a different sense, especially if you can't if you're not so comfortable with non-fiction books. It's a really good way to sort of start getting into them, because talks for only about an hour, you get a really nice broad introduction to things, and then hopefully they might inspire you to pick up a book either by that person or on the topic that they were talking about. And the first talk, Helen Castor, this is the book I've recommended from her before, She-Wolves, and it's on the women who ruled England before Elizabeth. I think I may have done a full review down below. I can't quite remember. If I have, I'll leave it down below. But at some point, I will be doing a sort of full guide to Helen Castor's books. There's only 3 at the moment, but someone's asked me to do some videos on my favourite non-fiction authors, and I will do them, just they'll be fairly few and far between, because if possible I like to talk about all of the books that an author has done, and that takes quite a long time to read all of them quite often. And the one that's more relevant to the talk that I went to is this recent book that Helen Castor did on Joan of Arc. This was also a BBC TV programme recently, so you'll probably still be able to find that online somewhere if you're interested. But her talk was on the Battle of Agincourt and putting the Battle of Agincourt in context, which she became interested in when researching this topic, because most people know a lot about Agincourt and Henry V from the Shakespeare play, which does give a very rosy idealised version of it and of the battle's importance. It sort of says, and Agincourt happened and then Henry won France. And yeah, not quite what happened. And the talk was fascinating because as she's been studying Joan of Arc for the last few years, she has quite a strong history background now in medieval France, which was a very different setup to medieval England, a lot less sort of centralised control, and it really put it in a much broader context, talked about the battles afterwards and how, while Agincourt was very influential, it really was part of a grander context of fighting rather than just this one decisive battle that changed everything. And Helen Castor is a wonderful speaker. Quite an academic speaker, very interesting, very factual, but not the most sort of overly entertaining. It was very interesting to listen to and she spoke well, but it just wasn't she wasn't sort of playing the audience well, doing anything like that, which you don't normally expect from a historian. But as the talk I went to the next day will show, that he really did know exactly how to work an audience very well. And I would hugely recommend anyone going to see Helen Castor talk. I think she is able to get across her points very well, keep the information quite rich and deep, but also not make it too dry or boring, and certainly not to do it too high over people's heads. She pushes you to learn and to understand, but without sort of making it inaccessible. So I thought she was absolutely fantastic, and if I get the opportunity to see her again, I will definitely be going to listen to her. And because of her, I'm now really interested in reading a little bit more about Agincourt, because I definitely didn't know an enormous amount. The early Tudors have started to become a great interest of mine, but it's certainly not something I know enormous amounts about. So it's something that she's very nicely inspired me to find a few more books on and to read a little bit more about. And then the talk on Sunday morning was by Marc Morris, and it was King John. And he's very much sort of reassessing the reassessment of King John. In the mid-20th century, he was sort of reassessed, and everyone sort of decided, oh, maybe he wasn't quite so bad. And Marc Morris is saying that's a load of nonsense. He was an absolutely atrocious king. And that was really a lot of what his talk was about. And he didn't really talk very much about Magna Carta. I thought that possibly with it being this year, there might be a bit more emphasis on the Magna Carta, but the talk was very much about the run-up and why Magna Carta became necessary in such a way. And he was very, very entertaining. He had enough sort of jokes and laughter to sort of perk people up and keep everyone interested the entire way through. And yet he did still keep it very interesting and properly historical. My biggest complaint was that I think he probably tried to squeeze far too much information in. I'm about halfway through his book on the topic, and by the sounds of it, he seems to have tried to do a condensed version of his entire book, and he was only talking for about 45 minutes. And I think it would have been a slightly better talk if he'd have narrowed what he was going to talk about, and either talked about the sort of the troubles of his reign, or just his key points rather than the battles, or just something focused a little bit more, because it did mean that he jumped around a little bit, and I certainly would have liked him to go a little bit further into depth. I'm really enjoying the book because of that. I like going into further depth because I do not know very much about King John, so it's really interesting to find out about him. He is very, very entertaining. Made people laugh. A good few sort of popular references towards like the Robin Hood Disney film, which is how most people start learning about King John or getting any idea about him. All totally wrong, because he had nothing to do with the Robin Hood at all. The legends of Robin Hood, obviously. But he was a really entertaining speaker, and I would recommend either watching his TV programme Castle, if you get the option to do that, or if he's around you, listening to him speak, because he was, the 45 minutes flew by. I found it very, very interesting. But I really would have liked a little bit more sort of depth of information there. Considering the whole weekend was about history, I think most people who would have been already had a sort of general understanding of history in a little bit more depth than maybe average person might, because they've chosen to go to listen to history things specifically. But overall it was really good, and it was quite good to see the total contrast between the two of them, because the two people I saw I thought had really the opposing strong points and weak points. Helen Castor just wasn't quite so overly engaging, but her information and her depth was really fantastic. And Marc Morris didn't have quite the depth, but was a hugely entertaining speaker, and I definitely would have a look at some of his stuff again, which I didn't think. From a few things that I'd heard about him beforehand, I wasn't so sure I'd enjoy the talk, I wasn't so sure I'd enjoy his history, but I am so far loving the book. I think it's really interesting. It's not perfect, but I'm really enjoying it, and he's written on the Norman Conquest and Edward I, I think, just looking at the back of the book. Yep, Edward I. And I would definitely, if the book continues to be as good as it is so far, and I am literally about halfway through, I'm just getting to the photographs in the middle, and so far I would definitely recommend him. The book is King John, Treachery, Tyranny and the Road to Magna Carta, and this was published this year, I believe, by Ex Libris. Let's have a look. It's Penguin Random House 2015, so yeah, very, very new book, very relevant with it being the anniversary of Magna Carta. So yeah, I would recommend this so far, but you'll probably see it in the end of the month review because it is coming up very shortly and I'm bound to finish it. So overall, I loved the BBC History Weekend. I'm really sad that we didn't have the opportunity to go to more talks. Sadly, it was just the wrong weekend to go and see too many of them because we had a lot of other things on. But I will be keeping an eye for very similar things in York and for the BBC History Weekend in other places again, because it was an absolutely fantastic way to spend some time. The information was great, the range of speakers was great, there were so many people I would have loved to have seen, and certainly if I ever get the opportunity to watch Jimena Ramirez, I will definitely be there because I love her work and I think she's really fascinating. So if you've got any comments or questions, please leave them down below. If you know of any other similar weekends like this, please again let me down below. And what do you think of going to history talks, or not necessarily history, but specialist talks as a general member of the public? Do you enjoy doing it? Do you think it's worthwhile? And any just comments or questions, leave them down below. Hopefully I'll see you in a video soon. Bye!